am very pleased to be here. My name is Natalie Birch. I'm representing the INTOSAI-Donor Corporation, representing SECO Switzerland. The INTOSAI-Donor Corporation is a collaboration between the global organizations of Supreme Audit Institution from 195 countries and development partners such as the World Bank and bilateral partners. Has recently created the new role of Goodwill Ambassador for SAI Independence. We are delighted to have appointed the Right Honorable Helen Clark to the role. Helen served 3 terms as Prime Minister of New Zealand, 8 years as UNDP Administrator, and is today engaged in several global initiatives, including the panel on pandemic preparedness and response, as well as the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us. You were an obvious choice for this role, but can you tell us more about the role and why you decided to take this on?
Well, thanks, Natalie. I do regard the independence of countries' audit institutions as extremely important in ensuring that there is effective oversight of countries' finances and the way in which they're spending their money. And it was on the basis that there were a number of worrying developments in this area around the world that the leadership group of the INTOSAI-Donor Cooperation asked me to take on the role of being a global ambassador. The idea is that I would help lift this very important issue onto the global policy agenda, raise awareness and help mobilize support for Supreme Audit institutions which want to enhance their institutional independence. Now, every country on earth has a Supreme Audit institution, and their role, as I implied earlier, is to keep a check on how the government is using public resources, taxpayers' money, through regular audits. These institutions play a key role in what we might call the accountability ecosystem. That's that network of institutions which is established to hold governments to account. Now, unfortunately, not everywhere do Supreme Audit institutions have enough independence to fulfill this function fully. And overall, the trend of curbing their independence has been moving in the wrong direction. Recent research by the INTOSAI Development Initiative, IDI for short, and the World Bank shows that the Supreme Audit institutions globally increasingly face interference from the executive arm of government. That could range from perhaps the more subtle interference with regard to the level of oversight they have over budgets and organisations, or restrictions in access to information, but it could run all the way to very direct interference with the audit officer's role. We saw this recently in Sierra Leone, where the Auditor General and her deputy were both suspended from office shortly before the release of their annual report. This is very disturbing. Independent oversight is just so critical in any system. In democratic systems, it absolutely has to be taken as read that this will happen. And it's essential for building and keeping the trust of citizens in their governments. The trends we're seeing of curbing the independence of institutions sadly are linked to the increased authoritarianism we're seeing in governments across regions of the world. So, of course, I fully support the mission of the Development Initiative and its work to enhance the independence of the world's supreme audit institutions.
Thank you very much. I think not everyone is aware, though, of the work of Supreme Audit institutions and how vital really their independence is to their effective operations. In your role of bringing the matter of independence to the global audience, how would you describe SAI independence and the common challenges faced by Supreme Audit institutions?
Well, first, I think we can refer back to the set of principles which was established by INTOSAI and also recognised by the United Nations through 2 resolutions. And those principles include the principle of security of tenure for these statutory officials, Auditor Generals, their deputies, and independent appointment and removal processes of them. They include the principle of having unrestricted access to information and able to use their discretion in how they discharge their mandates. And they should have the ability, the freedom themselves to select the scope and the timing of the audit reports. Now, a recent stock-taking report published by the INTOSAI Development Initiative shows that the independence of our world's supreme audit institutions has been declining across most indicators in those kinds of areas that I just mentioned. And most notably, the institution's ability to access information that they need freely has declined a lot in recent years, as has their financial autonomy from the executive arm of government. I suppose it's not surprising that the COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated these challenges, as it's exacerbated many challenges around the world. The INTOSAI Development Initiative is also seeing a lot more requests for support through its rapid advocacy mechanism. That's a tool which can help respond to threats to Supreme Audit Office independence. The regional variation of these requests coming from around the world highlights the global nature of the pressure that Supreme Audit institutions are under. So when I am advocating on this, I will want to highlight specific cases, as well as always drawing attention back to these principles of Supreme Audit Institution independence, going from where it's working very well to where it's clearly been put under threat. And I'll be keen also to draw parallels with and connections to other relevant topics of global importance. For example, corruption. How are our Supreme Audit institutions able to expose that problem? How are they grappling with the issues of auditing for climate change impacts, gender equality, other issues? An independent Supreme Audit institution able to freely pick the scope and type of its audits clearly underpins examination of all these issues.
Thank you. And on that note, what methods are you planning to use to contribute to putting this issue on the agenda globally, and especially the countries where the lack of SAI independence is really a concern?
So I think there's a range of ways of doing it. Obviously very happy to address conferences and such events virtually, perhaps as we conduct this interview now, but also with the world opening up a little bit more, I hope in person, and through that kind of engagement to open these issues to wider audiences. I'm also personally very active in social media, which I find extremely useful as a way of reaching out to broader audiences. So I can amplify the messages around Supreme Audit Institution independence on the platforms that I have myself, and also deal with some lively discussions, I would think, going by what I often get back on my, for example, my Twitter feed. It's surprising in a way that the issue of Supreme Audit Institution independence hasn't had enough attention in global policy discussion around public financial management, anti-corruption efforts, and upholding integrity. But this is changing. And the INTOSAI Development Initiative is obviously working very actively to build partnerships with a range of stakeholders, including civil society, both global and national, to support raising awareness on the issues and to create a bridge between what we might call different communities of practice on these issues. So I certainly look forward to supporting that outreach. Now, I think, again, we should take the opportunity of the problems that the pandemic has exacerbated to raise issues related to the need for financial oversight of an independent character. In response to the pandemic, there have been the most incredible flows of emergency funding deployed from national budgets from high-income countries to low-income countries. And as well, the international financial institutions have dispersed a lot of funding. People may recall the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, saying at an early stage of the pandemic to countries, spend what you can in order to address the pandemic, but please keep the receipts. That's the issue, isn't it? Keep the receipts so the audit office can check what happened to the money. So these incredible flows of money around the world and within countries have put a spotlight on the need to support integrity systems like independent audit at the country level. Now, external providers of funding, and we're talking here our international financial institutions, regional development banks, bilateral donors, other big multilateral funds like the Global Fund or Gavi, there are so many, they rely on Supreme Audit institutions to audit the use of such funding as well. And we see Supreme Audit institutions globally doing their best to conduct spending audits into this COVID-19 emergency spending. What we know is that the risks of mismanagement and corruption will increase in times of crisis and pressure like this, and that the independence of the Supreme Audit institutions is just so important to keep that check on government finances during a crisis and beyond, and to hold government to account when they see a mismanagement or misallocation of funds. We have seen that in some countries, the publication of audits on this COVID-19 related expenditure is being delayed. In some cases, it seems clear this is due to direct interference from the executive arm of government. And of course, the follow-up of audit reports is a continuing challenge. So I hope that these are the kind of cases where I, as Goodwill Ambassador for the Supreme Audit Institution's independence, can add some value by highlighting the issues.
Thank you. And finally, maybe a more personal question. As Prime Minister of New Zealand, you obviously had your own experiences of working with the New Zealand Office of the Auditor General, but perhaps also in your role of leading the UNDP. Could you share with us which observations you will be bringing to the role based on personal and political experience?
So I spent 27 and a half years in the New Zealand Parliament, 9 as Prime Minister, 3 as a Minister, a bit down the ranks from that, and of course the other years as a Member of Parliament, both opposition and government. And in those capacities, you're very aware of the importance of the role of the Supreme Audit Institution in our country called the Office of the Auditor General. When you're an opposition Member of Parliament, the Auditor General's reports, of course, are pure gold because they'll always bring out something that's not quite right, whether deliberately so or it just happened that things weren't as good as they should have been. So for an opposition, and an opposition is also an important check in the democratic system, you come to take a great interest in the Audit Office reports. I have chaired a parliamentary committee. Parliamentary committees every year look at government expenditure. It may be done through sector committees and some through a particular finance and expenditure committee, but every government budget gets looked at. And again, the committees use these reports. They're extremely important. And then as Prime Minister, you also want to know that the money you're spending is being properly spent. So if Audit Office, for example, decides to do a report into a particular project or program and it doesn't come up smelling of roses, as we say, you want to know that because you want it fixed, and you will say, the minister, fix that. We're not going to have that happening with public spending. So in New Zealand, the office obviously has a high degree of independence. The Auditor General is usually quite popular with the public and the media because the audit office is seen as speaking truth to power. And it's just extremely important in a democratic system like the one I've been active in that this is so. So in a way, I hope New Zealand has a gold standard of Supreme Audit Institution Independence. Now, when I went to UNDP for those 8 years, I took with me the background in New Zealand government. And New Zealand, in the normal course of events every year, will be ranked as first equal or second equal or somewhere like that in the global perceptions of corruption survey. And in other words, being first or second equal means you're judged to be the least corrupt in the world. So I took that very strong ethic of non-corruption and integrity in office to UNDP. And UNDP had a sizable governance portfolio. And in that portfolio, a lot of its programming was around trying to improve the capacity and integrity of public administration and supporting the institutions that did that. And what I became so aware of working in international development over these years was that there is a tremendous amount of diversion of financing from what should be going to public purposes. Tax revenue should be allocated properly, or flows of resources into public coffers from, say, extractive industries, where it never reached the target because someone was siphoning it off. And this deprives countries of the right to development. If you have, countless zillions of dollars of public money not being able to be spent for the purpose it should be able to advance human and sustainable development, this is a huge net loss. So if you can support the institutions that try to monitor this, and that includes our parliaments, it includes supporting the concept of a free media, and it includes these important statutory offices like Auditor General, like Ombudsman, where that exists, and obviously also the whole system connected with the courts, the prosecutor function, the court function, and so on. So this was a very important aspect of the work of UNDP to advance integrity in public administration. And I was able to bring the background from New Zealand to that.
Thank you so much for so clearly highlighting the important work that SAI do, but also the need for independence, especially during crisis and difficult situations. And the INTOSAI-Donor Corporation is extremely grateful that you accepted the role of independence ambassador. And I think SAIs need our support more than ever. And this appointment is extremely timely. And yeah, once again, we're very grateful and looking forward to a fruitful collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.